All right, so this is going to be a tier list for everything that is not a character in Swarm League of Legends, such as weapons, passes, and even YUUMI augments. And when I say weapons, even character weapons. So we're going to be judging them after the weapons tier list because they're kind of in a different category since it's character specific. So let's start off with a weapons tier list, starting with F tier weapons such as Tibbers and YUUMI bot. Basically with Tibbers is honestly, I think YUUMI bot's the worst weapon, but Tibbers actually deals damage. You see, YUUMI bot, it picks up XP and items. That's kind of it, and I think it damages enemies sometimes, but usually runs around doing nothing. And I think if you evolve it, it stuns people, but like, I mean, you're using a whole gun slot just to stun people. That doesn't really do damage. Yeah, you can get pickup radius with YUUMI bot with Xayah, but like, I mean, who cares? If you're playing Xayah, you probably already have her passive picking up everything around you. Plus, you'll probably have like 5 points in pickup radius passive ready, right? And you get the upgrade, which gives you passive pickup radius, so you don't really need it. Trust me, it's a useless gun, does nothing. And Tibbers, on the other hand, I think the AI is just bad and is also single target. I haven't actually looked at the DPS of Tibbers, to be honest, but there are times the AI just sucks, and yeah, I don't know. I don't like it. It also scales with duration, which I absolutely hate as an augment, but you'll see later on my passive tier list. And then we have Bat Blades. Now, I got this augment. I think it's okay with like Seraphine, but to be honest, I saw it doing really weak damage, and it's random. It doesn't even shoot in a direction. It's supposed to bounce off walls and basically deal damage off that. The more walls it bounces off of when it's evolved, the more damage it does. But I think it's really only good against Bel'Veth. Otherwise, I mean, you're not usually want to be standing next to walls in this game because you might spawn on a mine, or you know, you want an open area to kite in, right? I honestly would take this if it did more damage, but right now it does like, it's so weak. I was looking at the damage, it's not good, and I swear to God, I saw it going through enemies while dealing 0 damage. It could be a bug, maybe it's intended, I'm not sure, but the DPS on it is really bad. Next up is going to be less garbage, which is going to be Singe Poison as well as the Mine. So Singe Poison, the only thing it's good for is actually evolving it, and it gives you movement speed, which is kind of useful, especially if you're like Riven or someone who scales off movement speed, you know, like the movement speed YUUMI augment, which is awesome. But otherwise, it actually is, you know, huge AoE. It just doesn't deal a lot of damage, and it's very slow. I don't really like it. DPS wise, sucks. Same goes for the Mine. This thing sucks. I was watching it, and it would bounce. It says it bounces into people, and I think it infinitely bounces after you evolve it. But the damage on it is, again, quite low. I was not impressed by it. I was like, I don't know why I'm getting this. The only reason it's decent is because you can evolve it from the damage augment, but otherwise, very low damage Mine that doesn't, well, it doesn't do damage. Sucks. No utility either. Might be better at damage than Singe Poison, but otherwise, meh. Now we got B tier, and honestly, these items, these guns are okay, but they're just okay at best. For instance, Radiant Field, I actually think is good early game, but it kind of falls off later. I know when you evolve it, it makes them burn, and it's really cool, but otherwise, I think it's only good in like Briar and even Leona. Everyone else can't really use it. I also believe it can't crit. I might be wrong on that one, but I don't think it can crit. But honestly, it's very cool if you get area size with it, and that's the only thing I like about it. But I do think it does rather have a little bit low DPS. Otherwise, it's cool as hell, especially against bosses. It's like whatever, but it's good on tanks. Next up is the gun that shoots guns for a little bit duration. I actually don't know what it's called. The purple gun that looks funny. So I think this gun is, you know, AoE, big damage. I also don't believe it crits either, so I don't like it as much. I think it might be worse than Radiant Field, but honestly, I haven't seen the DPS check on it. I do believe that it does suck more than Radiant Field because it scales with duration and evolves from duration. Not really any champion uses duration besides Zlawi. So, and I also think duration is one of the worst passes in the game to get. So yeah, it's one of the, I should probably rate it in C tier, but I'm not too sure about it because I don't actually know how much DPS it actually does. Next up is going to be Searing Bolt. Now I like it actually, kind of good. It's like Radiant Field, but like in another place, projectile. It's okay in my opinion. Damage DPS wise is a little bit low, but okay, that's why it's in B tier. The next one is going to be Anima Mines. Now this one is actually good because it has 2 instances of damage. So when you evolve it, it's like the little satchel W from Ziggs W, but then it explodes into more. You can deal a little bit more damage, but otherwise AoE mid to low DPS, it's okay. Next one is going to be Leon's Torment, the one that shoots 2 projectiles when it's evolved across your screen. Might not be called Leon's Torment, but it's the blue laser that shoots sickles, you know. I think it's incredibly mid. I don't know, the damage is okay, and when it evolves I think it becomes alright, but because it's super AoE, you know, shoots across your screen, I don't think the single target DPS on it is that good. But to be honest, it looks really cool, and that's the only thing I like about it. Next up is going to be Bunny Blast from the Sky. Now I checked the DPS of it. It scales with crit, it evolves from crit, but honestly it's pretty mid. I think the cooldown on it is a little too high for how much damage it does, and I don't really like it, to be honest. But because it evolves from crit, it's really good to have if you are not really looking for a specific build and you're going with the flow, and crit is a really good stat. So yeah, probably want to get this if you have crit, or if you have no other good options. In A tier, I do believe Vortex Glove is pretty good because it shoots a bunch of projectiles, which is really good at taking down bosses. Unfortunately, the only thing I don't like about it is that it's kind of random and you can't really shoot where you want it to shoot. But against bosses, I think it does a lot of damage if you can get it in right. If you're sitting on top of the boss, it makes it even better. The only thing I don't like about it is that it scales with health regen, something I'm not a fond of for passive stats, but if your champion likes it or scales with it, you can get it. Next up is going to be Static Sword. Now, I don't know, this actually does a lot of DPS for how much it AoEs, and has a pretty good base damage on it, to be honest. Can also really good on tanks, so you know, if you scale with max health, they love this item. It's so OP. Unfortunately, I do believe it falls off late game because it's not single target and you gotta kill bosses like the elite and all that stuff. So it's good for early game, but otherwise I wouldn't like go it if I have to. I'm playing like a carry, like Yasuo or something like that. I heard there's some synergy with Briar and other people, but I haven't tested out too much because I'm usually playing carries. Oh yeah, and when it evolves, well, it's got a nice little staticky thing around people, right? I don't actually know how much damage that thing does, but I think it does all right damage. Doesn't look like it's being super OP. Next up is going to be the Boomerang. Now, I like this one because it summons a bunch of projectiles and is actually decent for bosses because each projectile actually deals an individual damage to bosses. So this one can be okay. When it evolves though, it's like a circular boomerang and then it comes back in and then shoots little smaller projectiles. So if you want to kill bosses and deal much damage as you can, it's going to be sitting on top of them again. And I mean, sometimes you don't want to, but it's okay. I like it. Unfortunately, it scales with movement speed, and the only one I can see like really abusing it is probably Riven. A lot of champions don't really want to go movement speed, so I don't like the evolve stat, but it's okay. Next up is going to be Annihilator, bro. Honestly, this weapon, I love it. And when it evolves, you get XP and gold for every like 20 seconds. And if you have enough ability haste, it comes down decently often. Basically one-shots your whole screen. And yeah, who doesn't like that, right? Unfortunately, it does scale with XP. So if you're not the XP slave of the party, then it's like, yeah, it's kind of useless. And late game extreme, I think XP is worthless because you'll evolve everything, so you don't need XP. It's only like when you're playing easy and hard. So because it evolves from some garbage stat, it's like it's okay, and because I don't want that stat. But honestly, it'd be S tier if it evolved from like damage or something like crit. Next up is going to be the Train. Now the Train, I think, is all right. It's pretty mid. I think it's AoE damage more than single target. Actually does quite a bit of damage when it hits things, and then when it evolves, you get gold more when it kills things. But the reason I like it is because it evolves from the damage stat and also scales with armor. And you know, I'll go into depth with those two stats and why I like them. But otherwise, this weapon is kind of mid tier. It's kind of unreliable. It's not really good against bosses, but it does scale with really good passives, which I'll talk about later. And next one is going to be the circling slicers. Now, I actually don't really like it because it scales with health regen, and that's one big thing I don't really like. Maybe like Briar or someone would like it. But yeah, I view health regen as a stat that's like whatever, it evolves from it. At least it scales with crit. But the reason I actually like it a lot is because if you're doing a boss or something like that, you can actually spin in a counterclockwise motion. So you're spinning blades, and when it's evolved, it's permanent. Your spinning blades will actually deal more damage if you're circling in a counterclockwise motion. So basically you can abuse a little, not really bug, it's kind of just there, a little trick to make it do more damage, which is honestly kind of cool. And obviously if you spin clockwise, it'll deal less damage. So it's A tier. Unfortunately, health regen it's evolved from, so it kind of is like eh. Now finally we got the S tier weapons. These three are giga OP on anyone. They all scale with crit, I guess, except for maybe actually the ice armor does, but to be honest, the reason the ice armor is so good is because it nullifies a single damage that might have hit you, and the cooldown on it is relatively short. So if you have ability haste, it comes up even more often to nullify a damage, as well as stunning people who are around you. And I mean, it's just CC. It also deals damage for some reason. I think they should take that out, but whatever. I think it's kind of low DPS, and yeah, it also grants you a shield when it's evolved. So hey, survivability, you want to get this. By the way, it also evolves from armor passive, so giga OP, nullify damage, it's giga OP. And Ooh Blaster, this is actually broken as hell. This does so much damage to bosses. So, you know, it's a projectile that shoots in one direction. It can only hit one person, and it auto targets, which is nice. It's not random, but you know, have this thing evolved from ability haste. Again, OP augment or passive. Does a lot of damage, single target DPS, OP against elite. You need this against bosses. It's awesome. And then finally you have Battle Bunny Crossbow. This is a very strong weapon. I don't know why it does so much damage, but like it scales with random crit chance and critical strike. I think the more crit you have, the more damage it does, something like that. It's OP. When it's evolved, it does 30 projectiles shooting from you, and the thing is, each of these arrows do a single instance of damage. So if you're Leona or someone who can sit on a boss, who in them, all 30 projectiles will hit that boss and deal tons of damage. That's why it's really OP. On top of that, each arrow actually has a very nice base damage, so it just does a lot of damage even if only one arrow hits. It's kind of dumb. OP. Now we can finally talk about character weapons, which are OP and not OP. All right, first up is gonna be Leona. Low DPS, doesn't really do anything. It's just there. I mean, it doesn't make her bad, but it does have a relatively low damage, and I say that scales with armor, but it's just also high cooldown as well. It doesn't do much damage. Next up is gonna be Laui. I just don't like her. I mean, the tentacles can rack up and you can spam them, and then it does a bunch of damage. It's kind of cool, gives you health regen, but the damage is all right. And I mean, your damage comes from staying still in an area. This is just character design. I don't really like her. I think she just sucks. Actually, worst thing about her is her tentacles can't crit. So yeah, that's why she's C tier. I mean, she might even be worse than Leona, but at least she has a bunch of tentacles and not with just one shield. Next up is gonna be Aurora. Aurora, honestly, her projectiles are kind of fun to use. That's why I only rated her a little bit higher, but they don't do as much damage as the big explosion from the Hex. And yeah, it takes a while for her to hex people and they can make it explode because it's every third auto attack, which is stupid. And she has spirits and they're absolutely useless, so that's why she's here. If they made her projectiles somewhat useful, I think she would be okay, but they don't do a lot of damage, so she sucks. Next up is going to be Seraphine. Now, I really like her kit. Her passive is nice, gives 25% more projectiles, or well, 25% chance to double projectiles. Unfortunately, on crossbow, for some reason, it only shoots one more, but I guess it's okay. The thing is, it doesn't do much damage, and it's really high AoE. Yes, it slows them. It's good for like utility for your team and to kite better, but damage wise it sucks, and it's made up for the AoE it gives when you get more points into it. It's a more utility than damage tool. Her passive is cool though, so you can go like a projectile build with her, and Maybe that's why she's a little bit higher, because I include passives when I think about this sometimes. Because next up is going to be Jinx. Now Jinx, I actually like her auto attack thing, her Meow Meow gun. It actually does a lot of damage, especially to elites, and it's very single target DPS. And when you evolve it, it does finally pierce. But besides that, I absolutely don't like it early game because it can't pierce through one target, so it's relatively weak. Unless you get good other guns and someone that carry you or something like that. But once it's evolved, it finally becomes awesome. I think it's actually something good, especially with her passive giving her a 150 ability haste when she gets excited. So I like her gun. Very good DPS. And of course the broken people. Maybe Briar isn't broken per se as herself, because her playstyle is whack, but her auto attack damage, especially when she presses E, is a lot, and it applies a bleed. But I think she does a lot of damage with her weapon. So yeah, she's kind of fun. I just don't like how she stands still and can be on enemies, so she's going to be taking damage because enemies are touching her. So yeah, that's why in my tier list she's a little bit less rated, but she does a lot of damage, especially if you go a damage build, which you can't because you need to be a little bit tanky. Unless you're pretty, you know, good at canceling your E at the right times. Next up is going to be Xayah. Honestly, her weapon is whatever, right? Whatever. Once you pair it with your E, then it becomes kind of OP because it does a lot of single target damage. And of course, the passive makes her picks up things. So, hey, what can I say? That's a lot. She just honestly kills bosses faster than anyone. So that's why she gets an S tier. Next up is going to be Yasuo. Yasuo's tornadoes just do a bunch of damage because he gets a bunch of crit from his passive and scales with crit. Hey, what can I say? He just does AoE damage, scales like a beast. His early game sucks, but it doesn't matter. Late game, just beast mode, tornadoes spinning everywhere, you know, and they come back. So it does double damage when you evolve it. Kind of lit. And then we got Riven, who, well, when she does damage, she gains a shield. And her evolved Q starts to knock up people, and if you're good at her, you can weave in and then weave out. I mean, her early game is bad, but once she gets rolling, hey, who doesn't like dealing damage and having a shield permanently? You can just run through everything, right? Definitely. Also, her auto attack is not based off her ability haste, it's based off movement speed, so you can actually skip the ability haste augment and go more damage, passives, or even other things like, you know, armor, health, whatever you want. So you're basically up an augment, or sorry, up a passive because you don't have to build ability haste on her to deal more damage. In a way, she has 7 slots instead of 6. Now, when it comes to passives, this is how I rate them. Basically, the worst passive is going to be duration. Now, duration actually probably helps some of the ultimates and some of the skills that you can use, but it doesn't really say which it helps with. But honestly, the guns it synergizes with kind of suck. Like Tibbers sucks, Lowy sucks, Champ sucks, yeah. And the gun that shoots around you and spins, I don't know what it's called, the purple gun. I think it can't crit, but it also doesn't deal a lot of damage to elites, so that's why I think it sucks. It just doesn't scale with anything that's great. Apparently, actually, it increases the duration of your CC, so it's actually not that bad. And also, it's not the worst, because I forgot, pickup radius is the worst, coming at number 11. I mean, it's just utility that picks up stuff. No damage, no CC, it's just picking up stuff. And like, eventually you get to a point where pickup radius is upgraded to the max, so who cares? And anima squad power, anima power gives you pickup radius, so this is a useless stat to ever get. It's garbage. Also, duration, it didn't increase the knockup of my allow AE. I don't know if it's the same as League where you can't increase knockup duration, but I mean, crowd of entropy from arena works, so I would assume it maybe works. But anathema chains doesn't work with knockups, right? It only works with like Leona stun. So I don't know, this game is weird. I don't know if duration increases stun. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But anyways, the next one that sucks is area size. Yeah, I know it's cool to have a big AoE, you know, but it doesn't offer damage. I mean, honestly, it's good on some champions like Riven and Alawi and I guess Leona, and maybe Briar as well. It's kind of good on a lot of champions, but other champions can't really use it. And it doesn't offer DPS, just AoE DPS, right? I'm not a fan of AoE DPS that much. Next up is going to be experience. Now, this obviously is really awesome in normal and hard mode. In fact, this is how you get everything evolved. So someone is going to be the person to get experience in your games and be the one to pick up orbs and experience orbs and the Belveth quest. So this is why this is rated a little bit higher than area size. But in extreme mode, it's actually really worthless because you get to a point where you can evolve everything. You're upgraded fully on experience and you can kill a lot of things. So you'll get all 5 things evolved without even grabbing this passive. So experience doesn't really need it in extreme, only normal and hard to get all of your evolved. And yeah, it's good obviously to get it quicker and spike faster, but eventually when you get to the boss in extreme, you won't need it. And it's like a worthless passive sitting in your passive slots. It does let you evolve Annihilator, which is something I like, but yeah, I mean, it's only good on Aurora because she evolves from it. Next up is going to be Health Regen. IMO, it's a decent stat to have, and it's good on like someone who shields a lot, like I guess Riven, and someone who has a lot of armor, maybe like Leona, but otherwise it's okay. I think it's an okay stat to pick up. It does evolve into Vortex Glove, which is I think a good one, as well as the Slicers. To me it's an okay passive though. There are definitely much better passives out there, which I'm going to be talking about right now. So number 6 is going to be health. We all know some people skill with health, such as, actually it's kind of in the same category as health regen. They're kind of hard to rate which is better, but I think health scales on Briar and Leona more than health regen. No one really has abilities that scale with health regen and do more damage except for those two, or gives more shield with Leona E. That's why I think it's better than health regen. Also, cross country is nice with it, right? You can scale more health with it. So yeah, there's a lot of things that give more maximum health on you. So max health is just better. And we have 2 at number 5 because I forgot there were actually 12 passives. So the first one is going to be projectile count. Coming in at number 5. Obviously, who doesn't like more projectiles? More DPS, more damage, looks cooler on your screen. And yeah, a lot of champions can abuse projectile count. And that's why it's one of the most expensive ones to upgrade. Unfortunately, it does upgrade kind of slow. Like you only get up to 3 projectile counts higher, not 5. So that, I mean, yeah, it's just, that's how OP it is, right? They gotta nerf it and it's still good. Definitely one of the better passives. Now, next one is gonna be movement speed. It's okay. Movement speed is cool, you know, kite better, walk around the map faster. It's utility. Unfortunately, it doesn't give damage. Or does it? Well, if you get that YUUMI quest augment, it gives you a ton of damage, so this becomes OP. Also, a lot of champions in this game actually like movement speeds. For instance, we have Yasuo. The more times you move around, the more flow you get, the more tornadoes you get. The other one is going to be Riven. The more movement speed you have, the more damage you do, more auto attacks you get, right? On tanks, it's actually like whatever, but some champions will definitely love this. I think it's OP because of that augment, or YUUMI quest augment. It gives you damage based on your movement speed. Overall, there's a lot of things you can do with movement speed in this game that have a lot of synergy, but it's mainly because of that one augment and that one YUUMI quest augment that makes it kind of broken. Next up is going to be armor, coming in at number 4. Armor is probably one of the best stats in the game because if you have a shield, such as Riven passive, or you know, other things like Leona passive E, I mean, it's just broken on her, right? It reduces damage, and hey, guess what? If you can reduce damage and you have a huge shield, that means you're reducing a lot of damage, right? Unfortunately, if you have a big health pool, well, your shields can't really keep up. That makes sense. You'll have a small shield relatively compared to your max health. Oh, and also scales with one of the best weapons in the world, Iceborne Gauntlet, or Ice Armor. So yeah, OP augment, I mean passive. And in no particular order, to be honest, we have number 3, 2, and 1, which is going to be damage, ability, haste, and crit. I do believe the order that you should prioritize is going to be ability, haste, and then damage, and then crit is going to be last. So to be honest, the order should be critical chance at number 3, damage at number 2, and ability haste at number 1. So you can think of crit as a multiplier. Well, it literally is a multiplier. And once you have enough damage from your guns, you have all your guns fully upgraded, then it starts to be multiplicative, right? That's why it's OP, and that's why Yasuo's OP as well. Also in the tooltip, it says it does 75% increased damage, but that's a lie. It actually does 100% increased damage when you crit. So hey, guess what? The tooltip's lying to you. It always does double damage, and yeah, awesome. Next up at number 2 is going to be damage. Damage is, hey, what can I say? It's damage. Everything scales with it. Everything, except for some things like, nope, Iceborne Gauntlet also scales with it. Yeah, everything scales with it. What can I say? But you want to upgrade it at the end, right? Prioritize guns. It's another multiplier, just like crit, but a little bit more consistent than crit. And finally, number 1 is ability haste. Hey, having your abilities up is a really nice thing to have. Also, it increases your DPS because they keep coming back up. I think everything also scales with ability haste, and the only thing that's actually bad about it is it's diminishing returns. So once you get somewhere near like 500 ability haste, it works like regular league, where after a certain point, I think it's like even 75, 100, it starts to be bad. You know, the heavy hitters one that reduces ability haste by 30, but it gives you 50% more damage. Actually, that's actually an OP augment, because usually if you're in extreme, you already have somewhere around 70 to 100 ability haste without this passive. So it's like, yeah, it's just scales with everything. What can you say? Some of your abilities also have invulnerability, right? So that's why it's awesome. Yeah, it's just the best passive in the world. Maybe you can say damage and crit are better than ability haste in extreme, just because they're multipliers. With this one, I mean, it's awesome. Everyone, all the top tier champions scale with it, except for Riven, and more invulnerabilities, more ultimates, etc. All right, so I'm going to be doing the YUUMI augment tier list. You know, this is it. I assigned each letter, you get the idea, but I'll just be talking about the S+ tier, and then when it gets below like C tier, I'm like, there's so much augments, I didn't realize it, but here it is. So the reason Mission Critical is S+ tier as well as Ramming Runner is because Mission Critical gives you 10% crit chance, as well as doing 30% increased critical damage. It might be 25% on live servers. All of this is outdated information back on PvE, but I'm going to be referencing the live numbers, so the description will be a little bit different as what you see on screen, but I'm referring to the live server one. So yes, Mission Critical is really nice. It's kind of OP because a lot of extreme carries will be having crit in their build, so this is what you want to go without getting any penalties. It could be argued as S tier, but you know, I think it builds onto every build, so I like it. Also, I do think Ramming Runner is better than Mission Critical. So Ramming Runner by itself, when you look at it, it's like, okay, so you need movement speed to get damage. Here's the thing, Anima Power plus movement speed with your upgrades already gives you movement speed. So even though you don't have a lot of movement speed that you gained in game, your upgrades do count towards it, and when you get this, it doesn't matter, you'll be upgrading your damage by like 200%. Probably the best augment in the game. No matter who you are, it just gives you automatically like 200% more damage. It's the best augment in the game. And of course, you can multiply it with many other augments or passives that you have, or whatever champion you're using. So hands down, best augment in the game. Take it if you see it. The other S+ augment is going to be cross country, 0 negative effects. All you have to do is run around the map. It's better if you get it early, but as a second augment, it's actually good. Gives you damage, gives you max health, and gives you movement speed, I think. So yeah, I mean, as a third augment, it's the worst thing ever. I would not touch it as third augment, but second or first, gives you free stats for no negative. Oh, it's increased area size, my bad. But it's also 4%, not 10%. It was really broken at PvE. It didn't even work though. Card Collector, one of the most broken augments in the game. Probably S+ tier. Good as first and second, really bad as third. I mean, you get 5% for each card. Can get up to like, I don't know, how much cards do you see? Maybe like 10 to 15 cards per game. That's why it's really broken. It should be S+ tier, but this is the picture I made. So Heavy Hitter is pretty broken. I know you get 50% damage, but you lose 30 ability haste, but who cares? You already have upgrades that give you ability haste. You have passives that give you ability haste. It's not losing a percentage of your ability haste. It's just flat 30. So that's why it's OP. Anything in A tier is usually something good, like all the damage augments, you get it. It just gives you damage. Armor up, I think, is a valuable stat. So that's why I think it's actually OP, especially on like tanks and big front lines. Riven is good with it too. Maybe on carries, it's not as good, like Yasuo or Xayah or Jinx, who doesn't want to get hit, but it's pretty good. And you have some gold making augments such as death and taxes, right? Some of these augments give you temporarily stats, like experienced fighter or critical expansion, but they're easy to proc, so that's why they're here. And then in B tier, it's just stuff that's like okay, but not like as great as A tier. Maybe it gives some damage. Maybe it's unreliable. So yeah, that's why I listen B tier. I think regenerative tissue is different from the decision you see right now. It gives you infinite stacking health regen. But it's health regen, so I don't know how good it is. I think it's good round 1 and 2, but maybe not 3. Same idea. And then C is just like okay, but kind of sucks. Like spray and pray, you lose 35% damage. You get 4 projectile count. It's a lot of damage you lose. It sucks, but it can be fun. D tier is just like whatever. Like I have uptime upgrade, 60% duration. It's only good on Lowy. So yeah, immobile immolation, that one's you just stand still and get ability. It's stupid, but it's fun. You know, some of these just suck. Gathering speed can be higher. Actually, it should be C tier, but I don't know. Maybe I was like, yeah, it should be C tier. It's not the worst, but it sucks as 3rd augment or even 2nd is okay. And then F tier is metabolic overdrive. I mean, it's a for fun augment. You lose 60% of your max health. It sucks. Don't do it. It's like you can get one shot by boss or something if you don't have enough armor or health, and you'll probably die. But yeah, that's it for the tier list video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll see you guys next time.